Okay, let's talk about the other issue which has to do with local government autonomy. And for our first guest, Mr. Yegbunam, he says, well, the state as well as the federal government should also, well, give them some kind of freedom, because well, we have come to realize that to a large extent a whole lot of local governments have not been able to function well, creditably well, because of this appendage to the state, and maybe sometimes well, when it comes to monies, to the government at the center. What's your take when it comes to the autonomy issue for grassroots governance?
Well, let me straight off the bat say this. The whole idea of the amendment of the Constitution, this exercise that we just went through, was by and large to restructure the country in the sense that to give a semblance of federalism, to devolve powers to the states, like it's done world over. And have we accomplished this? I don't know. I wouldn't really say so. In fact, I will say to the contrary, rather than devolve powers, we have empowered the center even more. The question of local government autonomy, let me again say, we're not against it. My party is not against it. The problem we have, and I have, is what is your definition of autonomy? There is a mix-up between autonomy and independence. We all know that local governments are not federating units. The states are the federating units. The states gave birth to local governments. So you cannot give birth to somebody, and I've said this over and over again, even in the House. You cannot give birth to something and expect an external force to control your child. So this is the implications of what we've done. Let me again, for emphasis, say we are not against autonomy. But what do you mean by autonomy? There were certain clauses, over 50 clauses, under that one clause of autonomy. And those are the clauses that we disagreed with, which empowered the federal government, for instance, to conduct local government elections. Where is that done all over, anywhere in the world? Now the local governments now become beholden, as opposed to becoming beholden to the state, they now become beholden to the federal government. So it's like being caught between the devil and the deep blue sea, which is the lesser of evil. What is the reason why a lot of people were against or wanted autonomy for the local governments? Because of the excesses of a lot of the governors, and we agree with that, absolutely. But then you don't, in one fell swoop, because of the excesses of the governors, destroy federalism as we know it. There are probably other ways that we could have sat down and looked for how to curb those excesses. You won't kill an ant with a sledgehammer, is again what I always say. But if you look at those clauses, clause by clause, where the federal government now determines how many supervisors are going to be in a council, determine your quorum, determine how you make resolutions. I mean, there's a problem with that in terms of federalism and the center being so strong. We've had situations where, for instance, the federal government has seized local government funds in Lagos State for over a year, in spite of what the Supreme Court said, that you have no right to do it. Now you have even empowered them to do that even more. There are many issues, many implications of these clauses. The devil is in the detail, and I've told a lot of my colleagues that the devil is in the details. Yes, we want autonomy. Yes, we want independence of them, and by all means, let's grant them that autonomy.
Okay,
but we don't grant in the name of autonomy turn local government into appendages, in this case, of the federal government. We have seen situations where state commissioners and state governors go cap in hand to the center. Now you're going to see local governments going cap in hand to the center. There's something anomalous in that picture. What we have done is to create a third tier of government. There are only two tiers of government in a federal structure. Again, like I said, local governments are not federating units. When you when you say there's a local government is a third tier of government, for each tier of government, there are three arms of government. There are three arms in each tier. There's the legislative, there's the executive, there's the judiciary. So what are we saying? Are we now going, where's the judiciary of the local governments? Are we now going to go on and now create the judiciary for local governments? So this is for me, these are the issues. Lagos, for instance, in its own wisdom, created more additional local governments. The center said no. The center has no business in how many local governments. As a matter of fact, states, from my interpretation of the Constitution, are not even compelled. They're not even compelled to create local governments. So what happens if a state, if there's a state today and we decide we're not creating any local government? What happens to that tier of government? So we revert back to 2 tiers for some states and 3 tiers for some states.
Let me bring in this question from,
what happens now if INEC is to conduct, which is what part of the clause is, conduct local government elections for states or for local governments? Who's going to conduct the local government election for the 37 LCDAs in Lagos? If you don't recognize them, who's going to conduct the elections if INEC is supposed to conduct the elections?
All right,
there's a big problem here.
He says, if there is local government autonomy, what happens to the local governments created by Lagos? Who funds them, and how autonomous will they be?
Well, that's the irony of this whole thing. You've created a dichotomy even within the local government structure. Lagos created additional 37 local governments. The center of the federal government refuses to recognize them, and we turn them into LCDAs. Now, these are administrative structures. Okay, again, that's what I was saying. If you say local government elections are supposed to be conducted by INEC, at the same time, the federal government does not recognize the 37 local governments, how do you then conduct elections in those LCDAs? Is it going to be SIEC? Is it going to be the state? Or are they going to be non-elective, which defeats the whole purpose? So yes, I mean, the whole, to me, it's just we've heard the word autonomous and we've run with it without understanding the implications. I believe that I kept saying there's a difference between independence. You can be independent without being autonomous. Give the local governments the right to do whatever they need to do. To an extent, you need to be able to rein in local governments where they have excesses. Just like every arm of government needs to be reined in when they overshoot whatever they're supposed to do. So, for me, these are the clauses. Again, the devil is in the detail. Autonomy for local government, yes, we want it. It is a good thing. But not when it comes to it depends on how you stretch that definition. Right now, the federal government determines everything that goes on in the local. Even the administration of local governments is determined by the federal government. The federal government did not give birth to local governments, the states did. As a matter of fact, local governments are not meant to be in the Constitution.
What do you suggest happens
therein lies the problem.
Cases where governors don't
we're yet to vote on those
elections for, say,
I believe we still have to vote on those clauses. We have agreed on the autonomy of local governments, but what determines or what defines autonomy are those clauses that we need to vote on. And I've made that abundantly clear in the House.
Okay, I did ask, what do you suggest happens with respect to implementing the Constitution where state governors don't conduct local government elections, say, for 8 years?
Well, I agree. So that's my point. I agree in autonomy depending on how you define autonomy. There is a clause in the Constitution that says democratically elected local governments shall be guaranteed. That's part of the autonomy, and we agree with that. I agree with a new clause that says that they will not be recognized by any institution of government if they're not democratically elected. Yes, that's fine. That's autonomy right there. That's guaranteeing their autonomy. There are certain provisions we agree with. So yes, as it is today, if you don't conduct local government elections, the new provisions of the Constitution says that those local governments or caretaker committees will not be recognized. We can take it to that extent, and some of us can agree, to disagree and accept that. But what we don't accept is those minute details, the minutiae, the little ridiculous things that have been put in, the clauses that have been put in that allow the federal government to basically run local governments. You're running from one problem and you're creating a bigger problem. Oh, but mind you, understand this. It is because of what the governors in a lot of states have done. So that is the motivation. Again, it's not ill-motivated. It's done in good faith. But does it achieve what we want it to achieve? Or does it create an even bigger problem where now the local governments are tied to the apron strings of the federal government?
But again, as it is, how would you describe our constitution? What kind of constitution do we have?
You know what? The constitution as it is today, I would say we have a unitary constitution, not a federal constitution. Everything begins and ends at the center. Look at the exclusive legislative list. We all clamored for devolution of powers. There's about 63, 64, 65 odd items in the exclusive legislative list. They remain intact. Railways have been removed, yes, to the concurrent list. As a matter of fact, I'll say this, I pointed this out on the floor of the House. Housing was not on the exclusive legislative list. Neither was it on the concurrent list. By implication, it means it falls on the residual list, exclusive to states. So really, hitherto, everything we were doing, the Ministry of Housing, building of houses by the federal government, to me was illegal because housing is not on the exclusive list. Neither is it on the concurrent. But now we have transferred housing to the concurrent list from the rest. We've taken it away from the states and put it back and put it on the concurrent list, allowing the federal. So that's what I mean by, rather than devolve powers, we have actually empowered the center even more.
Okay.
We have a unitary system, to answer your question, as opposed to a federal structure. I would have loved a situation where there were material changes, and the House has done well, and I'm not trying to knock the House. I would have loved a situation where they've even gone further. And
let's quickly get this
items on the exclusive, from prisons to there's just so many unnecessary items that are on the exclusive list that overburden the federal government.
Okay.
I would have loved to see where we're going even a little bit further. But like I said, it's an ongoing process, and I hope at some point we will revisit some of these areas so we can have a true federal structure where states.
What is your thinking, and perhaps that of the House, about the expectation of Nigeria Labour Congress about moving minimum wage matter from the exclusive list to the concurrent list? They're looking to the House of Reps now.
Well, I think that has been done. That has been done. The minimum wage remains within the purview of the federal government. Again, a lot of my positions may not necessarily be political. Again, I don't know if that is the best when we're talking about federalism, because uniformity and federalism are do not necessarily go together. The development of states must be based according to the resources and whatever the different things, the vagaries, the environment of each particular state. So it's that the minimum wage thing is something that can be debated, and my brothers in the Labour Congress may not necessarily agree with me. for you to have one uniform minimum wage. I think it's something we should look at.
All right, Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila, thank you very much indeed for speaking with us today.
Thank you.
All right, and Honorable Gbaja is the minority leader in the House of Representatives. We'll return in just a moment. Please join us again.